Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the Crafts from the Heart mini-series. My name is Leah, and I am your moderator today. Now, we have a fun week of live demonstrations and a bundle of Valentine's Day inspired patterns and recipes for you. So every day this week, we've got a new instructor streaming live as we knit, sew, crochet, decorate, and bake. These instructors will provide step-by-step demonstrations of all of these cute projects that are perfect for giving to your loved ones this Valentine's Day. Make sure to download the free patterns and recipes by clicking the link in the description. Now, if you have any questions during today's event, please leave your comments in the blue chat box below or in the chat on Facebook and YouTube. I'll be keeping an eye on those comments and questions during the entire event. And if this is the first time that you are joining us for one of these demonstrations, please feel free to ask any question whatsoever. If there are any questions that directly pertain to the project, I do like to slide those in so we can get to those as the steps are being outlined. But if you have more general questions, we often have time to get to those as well. So don't be afraid to drop in whatever is on your mind. And also, you can use it just to say hi, let us know what it is that you're working on and where you're watching from. So that chat box is there for you for the entirety of the event. Other than that, it's time to bring in today's instructor. So in studio with us, we have Brenda KB Anderson. Hi, Brenda. Thank you so much for coming and joining us today. I would love to have you start out with a little introduction about yourself and also what are we going to be making together today?
All right, awesome. Hi, Leah. Hi, everybody else. I'm Brenda KB Anderson, and I am the managing editor of the Creative Crochet Corner, and you may have seen me over there. I do a lot of live demonstrations of projects that are kind of fun, quick projects to do. I love doing this, especially in these big groups of, the Craftsy all week long, where everybody has a different take on, holiday crafting or whatever the theme is. It's so fun to see what the other instructors come up with, and it's really fun to see what kind of tips and things show up in the chat box too. I always learn a lot every time we do these. But today, I'm going to be showing you how to make the heart of gold earrings. That's what I'm wearing here. It's a little crocheted heart, and then the top is painted with the metallic gold paint, and then there's a chain that hangs from the fishhook earring style. So if you don't have pierced ears or you don't like wearing earrings like this, you can also think about putting this on a chain for a necklace or a bracelet, or you can make a larger one with a worsted weight yarn and use it to decorate, hanging on a doorknob or something like that, just for a nice little Valentine treat for yourself or for a friend.
Amazing. We've got a couple hellos coming in already. We have people coming in from Kansas City, a couple YouTube viewers coming in. Creative Wan is one username, Pavon is another, and Weba Campos is from Kansas City. So we've got people tuning in from all over. And like I said, if you're just joining us, my job is here to get your questions to Brenda. So if you have any for Brenda as she's going through this demonstration, please drop them into the chat. I know this is going to be a fantastic project. We got a little tease of this last week, and you said it was a great multimedia project as well. So get ready for a little bit of fun. I'm going to pass it right over to Brenda in the studio to get started with the demonstration. Here we go.
Okay. All right. First, I want to start by talking about the materials that you're going to be needing. So as far as crocheting the heart part of it, if you are making earrings and you want them to be about this size, I have listed actually in your pattern, which you'll want to download. You can do that now or you can do that later. It'll be accessible later. But definitely download this because it has all of the information that you're going to be needing. And it is a little bit easier. I mean, you can definitely just watch the demo, but you have your stitch counts in here, all the directions, and everything that you're going to need. So that will be a very helpful thing to have. So you're going to want to download your pattern. And then in your pattern, you will see that I have listed 3 different types of fibers that I use to create these earrings. The 3 that I listed here, I'm going to show them here lined up. So this is the largest one, and this I had used a crochet cotton, a number 3 crochet cotton. That's 100% cotton, and you can find it at big box stores. You can also find it in yarn stores. But it creates a slightly larger heart than these other 2 hearts. These are just a little bit smaller, even though the strands are about the same thickness. If you look at the pink and the crochet cotton that I was talking about. Actually, the pink even looks like it's slightly larger, but it's very, it's got a lot of halo and it's really squishy compared to this cotton. This is much more firm. So when you crochet it up, this actually ends up being bigger than this one. So this is just a fingering weight wool yarn that I used for the pink version, because I know a lot of people just happen to have that. If you're a crocheter or a knitter, you might already have that at your house. You might also have the crochet cotton too. And then I also wanted to include, you can use a pearl cotton, or actually you can even use embroidery floss, but the tricky part about embroidery floss is that there's all those little strands and it might be a little tricky to get your hook in and out. They might get stuck on the strands. So I would recommend instead using pearl cotton, which is what this is. It's just a twisted cotton thread, really a thicker thread that crochets up to about the same size as that fingering weight yarn. So this is a nice way to not spend very much on this. If you just wanted to make one pair of earrings and that's it, you could just buy one of these, or you would need two of the smaller skeins of the pearl cotton if it comes with this amount. So anyway, in any case, whatever you choose, just know that in combination with your hook, that's what's going to determine the size of your earring. So you can use what I listed in the pattern for a guide on choosing what you want to work with if you're really concerned about your earrings being too big or too small, or you want to have more control over that. So the next thing you're going to need, of course, is a hook. So I used a B, which is a 2.25 millimeter hook. This is a very small hook, and if you've never crocheted with a small hook like this before or using very fine fibers, this is a really good introduction to that, because it's just a small little project. It's not like you're making a gigantic doily or something and then you start and you're like, oh, I don't know, this is really small. It's hard to see, it's hard to hold on to. But this will give you a nice taste of what it's like to crochet with a finer thread or yarn. So you'll need a crochet hook, and if you don't have exactly this hook, it's okay. You can just experiment with the thread and or the yarn that you have and the hook, and you can just see what size the heart is starting to turn out like. You'll get a good idea pretty quickly, since it's such a quick little project. Then you will know if your earrings are going to be a size that you'll like. Okay, so you'll need a yarn, hook. You'll also need, I used this darner needle. You can use also a tapestry needle, but just make sure your tapestry needle, they come in lots of different sizes. Make sure your tapestry needle is fairly narrow. The thing you want to look for with your needle is it has to have a large enough eye that you can put two pieces of a thin beading wire, which is what's here in my hand. This is just a beading wire, and the specifics of this beading wire are in the pattern, but you can use any kind of wire that you are able to slide through the eye of your needle doubled. So you'll be sliding, let's see, like this through your needle. You'll be, later on we're going to be using this only to attach the chain to the earring. That's the only purpose of this, the beading wire. It's just a vehicle to get your chain through your earring. It's not part of your earring. So you'll need like a little piece of beading wire. It doesn't even need to be this long, just a little piece of that. Back to the needle though, you got to make sure that the eye of the needle is big enough for 2 strands of your beading wire, but also it has to fit through your heart. So, your stitches are fairly close together, and then we're going to add all this paint. So you don't want to use a very large needle, because it's going to be really hard to slide it between your stitches to get it through all the way through the heart, because later on we're going to be using this needle to thread the chain all the way through the heart. So I just want to explain all this to you, because the relationship between all these things matters. You need to be able to, also, you're going to need the chain to attach your earring to the fish hook, and the links in the chain, those need to be large enough so that you can thread a piece of your beading wire through the link in the chain. So, because that's how we're going to slide it, like I said before, that's how we're going to slide it through the heart piece. So you need to just make sure the links are large enough for that wire to go through. And I did list specifically what I had used, this chain. It actually came in a 3-pack of necklace chains. I just bought it at a big box store. It was very inexpensive. And then I used this chain, I just used my jewelry pliers to open up a link so that I could shorten the chain to the lengths that I want. So, and that's listed in your pattern. It's about 5.5 inches long here for the chain. That's what I used. However, when you make these, you can certainly use a different length chain. Maybe you like your earrings to be really long and you have a longer neck than I do. You can make it longer, or if you have a shorter neck, you know, and you want to make your earrings a little shorter, maybe you hardly want them to stick down at all past the fish hook, you can definitely make a much shorter chain so it just barely goes through the heart earring and connects up to the fish hook. So that is something that's up to you. But I would recommend either counting your links, which seems very tedious, or just being very careful when you lay this out and cutting both pieces of chain at the same time so that you know that they're going to be the same length, because it's going to be really hard when you cut your chain then to measure it later after you slide it through your earring. You're not really going to know exactly how long it was. So I would recommend cutting both your pieces at the same time. All right, and so I touched on this a little bit earlier, but you're going to need a pair of jewelry pliers. And even if you don't have to separate the links of your chain, even if you somehow have smaller chain lengths or something, you will still need these for attaching the jump rings to the chain. Here's the jump rings. Let me show you what those look like. These are just these little, I have oval ones, but you can certainly use circular ones. You just need these little rings to attach the two ends of your chain to that hole in the bottom of your fish hook, which is another material that you need, the little fish hook earring bits. So there are a lot of materials in this actually, but they're pretty inexpensive and a lot of them might be things that you already have already in your house. So, all right, we talked about most of the materials, but we do need, I forgot to mention, we do need to have fiber fill for stuffing the heart. That's what keeps it nice and puffy. So you need a little bit of that, just a small handful of that. And for painting the top of the heart, I did list exactly what paint this is. This is a Folk Art brand Treasure Gold. It's a metallic gold paint. You'll need that and a paintbrush for painting the top of the heart. And along with that, you might want to have like a little cup of water next to you so you can make sure that your paintbrush, the paint doesn't dry on your brush. And the last thing, actually the last two things you're going to need are you're going to be needing some quilter pins or some kind of long pin to stick into the heart for the painting process. So as you're painting your heart, you're going to be, getting it all wet up here. You'll have the bottom to hold on to because we don't actually paint the bottom. But then to allow it to dry, I put two little quilter pins onto the sides of my heart, and then I just hung it off the edge of a little plastic cup. So you'll need some sort of cup or some object like this that you can set your pins onto so that way the heart isn't touching anything while it dries. Whew! All right, I think those are all the materials that we need. So let's get started talking about how to actually make this. All right. So to begin, we are going to start with an adjustable loop. And the way that I like to make my adjustable loop, there's lots of different ways to make it. So, feel free to check out other ways to do it. But this is how I like to do it. I just like to draw a little E shape, like a little cursive E or a loop. And then I take the side of the loop that is connected to the ball and I flip it over onto that strand. And then I just put my hook underneath that center strand and on top of the other two. And now I'm holding, with my finger, I'm holding where they cross over, and I can kind of tighten that a little bit. But I don't want to tighten it all the way because we're going to crochet into that loop. So before we begin, we're going to kind of anchor this in place by doing a yarn over and pulling through, just a little chain one. And now we're going to crochet into this loop space here. We're going to make 6 single crochets into the loop. So to make a single crochet rather, insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That's the first one. Insert, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That's 2. We're going to do 4 more of those. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So now we have a total of 6. And at this point, we can kind of hang onto our piece and pull on that beginning yarn tail until the hole disappears to make that nice and tight. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to continue working around. We're not going to do a join, but we're just going to continue working around, and we're going to do 2 single crochets into each stitch around. So if it's tricky to figure out where your first stitch is, you can always count backwards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That little space between my thumbs, that is where we're going to insert our hook. Right here. And this is a little fiddly. Working this small, it is a little fiddly, so just allow yourself a little bit of extra time if you've never done this before. Okay, so you're going to insert your hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That was the first one. And now the second one in the same space. So we're going to insert our hook into the same spot, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. And we're going to use a stitch marker to mark the beginning of our round so that we don't get confused. And if you don't have a stitch marker that's skinny enough, I mean, this is a pretty standard stitch marker and it's fine, but you could use something else like a safety pin or something like that if you feel like you need something a little smaller. All right, so we're going to make 2 more single crochets into each stitch around. So there's the first and the second, and the first and the second. All right, we've already worked into 3 stitches. Now we have 3 more left. The first and the second. And 1 and 2 into that space. And whoops. 1 and 2. Now you may have noticed that I left my beginning yarn tail hanging off of the front, which might seem strange, but I like to do that because sometimes the way that I make my adjustable loop, this can open up a little bit as I'm working, and actually in any way that you're making an adjustable loop, it can also open up a little bit, but this is prone to be a little bit slipperier. So I leave my yarn tail on the outside, especially on small projects like this, so that I can weave it in later, and it's not going to end up on the inside of my tiny little project because that might be really hard to get to later. So just let that hang out coming from the center of your work, just hang it out there. All right, so now we have 12 stitches around because we doubled our stitches on that last round. And the next 2 rounds, we're just going to work a single crochet into each stitch around, just 1 in each stitch. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And you'll see it's starting to cup a little. It doesn't really want to lay flat anymore. You can push that down so that it's kind of more like a dome shape. And then we're going to do another round of exactly the same thing. Just 1 single crochet in each stitch around. 1, and then we're going to replace that stitch marker. So as you're stitching here, you do want your stitches to be at a fairly firm gauge. So even if you're kind of changing around what thread or yarn you're using for this project and matching it up with a different hook, just make sure that it is a firm enough gauge that your fiber fill stuffing is not going to be peeking through holes between your stitches. So that's kind of the main thing. I mean, the other thing it's going to affect is the size of your earring as well, of course. All right, so we have worked up through round 4. I'm just going to check the pattern here. I believe on round 5 we put a stitch marker in. Yep, okay, so we'll be putting a stitch marker in the first stitch of this last round, and on round 5 we're going to single crochet into each of the next 10 stitches and slip stitch into the next 2. So there's our first, and we're going to just keep our marker in there. Two, 3, 4. These are just 1 in each stitch around. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then 2 more slip stitches. 1, and 2. And the reason we're doing slip stitches here is just so that it's not such a jagged edge there, because we're going to fasten off right here. All right, so just leave yourself a little bit of a yarn tail so you can weave it in later, and then you'll just yarn over and pull through to fasten off, okay? And then that's the first lobe of the heart. That's what I call it, a lobe. But that's basically like the, the first little knob from the top of the heart here. And so then we're gonna start on the second half. And it is worked exactly the same way up until we get to round 5. So I'm gonna do it a little quicker this time. So we make our adjustable loop, and we yarn over and pull through to anchor it, and then we're going to do 6 single crochets here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then we pull that tight. Then we're going to do let the yarn tail hang out on the outside, and we're going to do 2 single crochets into each stitch around. 1 and 2, 2 and 2. See, it's very small, 3 and 2, so it's hard to hold on to, but you can just kind of pinch it with your fingers. You just have to kind of rearrange things every so often so that you have a place to stitch, because you're almost covering it up by your fingers there. All right, I think I've got 2 more left here. Let's count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, we've got our 12 stitches, and then we're going to do 2 more rounds of just 1 single crochet in each stitch. So I'm going to mark, I just worked 2 just now, so I'm going to mark that first stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then we're going to do that one more time to make that kind of bowl shape. So if you are newer to crocheting, I would recommend, if you want to make this project, I would highly recommend making this heart first with a worsted weight yarn and a hook that's maybe a G or an H or something like that, just to, the stitches I'm doing here are not very advanced. It's pretty beginner friendly. It's just the thing that makes it difficult for beginners is that, one of the hardest things about learning how to crochet is just figuring out how to hold on to things and having tension, the correct amount of tension everywhere. And, it can be, that is probably the most frustrating thing for most people who are learning. And then when you're crocheting with something that's this tiny, it can be very challenging if you've never really done this before. So you should be, I would say by the time you're going to start on a project that's this tiny, you should be feeling comfortable with how to hold a hook and how you like to hold the yarn and that type of thing, so that at least you don't have to fight that part. All right, so we've gone through round number 4. We're going to do round number 5 of the second lobe. So we're going to single crochet into each stitch around, and then we're going to mark the second stitch of this round with a contrast marker. So we'll go 1, 2, and then we're going to mark that stitch. And 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. Oops, I think I might have already worked 12. Let me just check. 1, 2. That's the second one. Okay. 1, 2. Oh, yeah, 1 more. There we go. All right, so after round 5, let's see, we've got round 6, place the first lobe, that was this one that we set aside earlier, and we're gonna put that right next to where we're crocheting, because instead of continuing to work around the lobe that we're working on, we are going to start working around this one. Oh, and I forgot to leave my stitch marker in there. I meant to do that. But we should have left this stitch right here. That was the first stitch of that round. So we're going to begin with that stitch. So basically here's the one it's connected to. Let me let go so you can see what I'm doing. Here's where the yarn ball is connected. We're bringing up this older lobe that we've already done, and we're going to start in what was supposed to be the marked stitch, which is right here. That was the very first stitch of that last round that we had done. So we're going to start working single crochets around. Let's see, 1 single crochet into each of the next 11 stitches. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. And we're going to leave that last stitch unworked, and then we're going to skip over to the marked stitch from that second lobe, okay? And we're going to continue working from where that marked stitch was. We're going to do 11 single crochets here as well. So this would be the first. So 1, see that kind of joined our 2 pieces together. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. That should be in basically the last stitch that you have accessible from that same lobe until you get to the place where it's connected to the next lobe. So after that, I have a little blurb that says, make 1 uncounted single crochet to shift the beginning of the round. So I do this often in my patterns when you work around and around, because as you work, when you're working in single crochet, your stitches start to veer off. Like every stitch you make is a little bit more to the right, a little bit more to the right, a little bit more to the right, unless you're left-handed crocheter, and then it goes a little more to the left, a little more to the left. So this is just to account for that sort of shifting of the rounds. So all we're doing is we're just doing a single crochet. Okay, we're not counting that as anything. We just did a single crochet into the next stitch, and now the next stitch is going to count as the new beginning of the rounds. So we're going to put a stitch marker in it after we make it. So the next stitch, that's where we start decreasing to create the bottom point of the heart. So in order to do a decrease, we're going to do a single crochet 2 together. So there's a couple different ways you can do that. The standard is you'll insert your hook into the next stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, insert your hook into the following stitch, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over and pull through 3, and that is perfectly acceptable, and that is fine. You can do that kind of decrease if you like. I like to do what we call an invisible decrease because it doesn't show up quite as much. And I like to insert my hook under the first loop of the next stitch and then under both loops of the following stitch. Now there are different ways to make an invisible decrease, but this is how I like to do it. And then I yarn over and I pull that strand through both of those stitches that I went through. And then I make a regular single crochet. I finish my regular single crochet, and I do a yarn over and pull through 2. And I'll be doing that a few more times here, so I'll show you that again. We're going to mark that decrease stitch, and then we're going to work 5 single crochets, actually 7 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then we're going to do another decrease. This is the invisible decrease that I like to do. So I slide my hook underneath that front loop, instead of going under both like normal, just under the front, and then under the next stitch I slide through both. And so what we are doing is we're already combining those 2 stitches together. We pulled those 2 stitches together as one, and then we're just going to finish the single crochet how we normally would. So we grab that yarn and pull through, and then we yarn over and pull through 2. Okay, and then we're going to make another decrease stitch. We're going to do an invisible decrease. We're going to, let's see, just need to make sure I'm going into the right space. Okay, so we'll insert our hook under the next stitch and underneath both strands of the following, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. There's our second decrease. And then we're going to do 7 more single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then we have 2 stitches left before that marker. We're going to do another invisible decrease. We'll slide our hook under the first strand and under both strands of the next stitch. Pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. So we've worked, that was round 9 of the bottom of the heart. And we're going to continue in this pattern, making decreases in the same places. So here's an invisible decrease. This is round 10 here. Invisible decrease. Or just single crochet 2 together, however you like to do it. It's fine to do it another way. And then 5 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, 4, whoops, 5, and then another invisible decrease here. And then we're going to do another invisible decrease right next to it. And then we're going to single crochet 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we are left with 2 stitches, and we're going to make that single crochet 2 together or an invisible decrease here, whichever you like. And so basically what we're doing is we're single crocheting around, but we're doing 2 decreases right next to each other on the front side of the heart and on the back side of the heart. All right, we're going to do that one more time. It just gets smaller and smaller, a little trickier to hold at this point. There's our first decrease, and we're going to do 3 single crochets. 1, 2, 3, and then another decrease. I get a lot of questions actually about when I say make a decrease. I think that's confusing because sometimes in the pattern it's written SC2 together, or it could be a different type of decrease, half double crochet 2 together. But that when I say decrease, I just mean you are whatever style of decreasing you're doing, whether it's an invisible decrease or single crochet 2 together, whatever it is, it just means you're working 2 stitches into 1 stitch. All right, so at this point, it's getting pretty small, and you're gonna have to stuff the heart at this point. Or if you are making a smaller heart with very teeny tiny thin thread, you're gonna have to just pay attention to wherever it's starting to get so small that you really have to stuff it before you continue anymore. So we're just gonna grab a little bit of stuffing, and you can stuff from the top in between where these 2 pieces are, like this. There's a little hole there, and I intentionally left that open so you could stuff from the top as well. I like to just stuff from the bottom, and I have kind of a rubbery crochet hook, so I'm able to stuff it in there, but you can use your finger if it's small enough, or you can use the eraser end of a pencil. Sometimes this takes a few times before the stuffing really starts to go in. There we go. But I'm just using this to stuff into each lobe of the heart, kind of one at a time. That's into that side. We're going to stuff into this side now. These smaller items, people might think, oh, it's so fast, it's so tiny. And it is pretty quick because you're not doing that many stitches, but there are, extra challenges to working something this small, learning how to hold on to things, being able to see. That's a challenge for me. So, give yourself a little extra time, a little extra patience when you're doing these types of projects because, yeah, it is very few stitches considering, but it can be hard to do because it's just so little. So you're just finding yourself, I don't know, you just feel like you have big clumsy hands sometimes when you're working on tiny things like this. All right, so the next round we're going to do is just 1 single crochet into each stitch around. So I'm trying to get the fiber fill to be mostly inside so that I'm not catching it with my crochet hook, because I don't want to go in there and grab and pull out the stuffing as I'm stitching. So here's our first stitch 1. Oops, at this point we should have, let's see, what are we at, 10 stitches? Yeah. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That one got a little loose. I'm going to redo that one. 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. All right, and then if you feel like you need a little extra fiber fill, you can add some, but the next round makes the point of the heart, so even if you can't really get any more in there, it's okay to make the point of the heart and finish it off, because you don't really need stuffing all the way down into the very tip point of your heart. Okay, so the last round is single crochet 2 together, 1 single crochet in the next stitch, single crochet 2 together, and then you repeat that. So we'll do a decrease here, or single crochet 2 together. And then 1 stitch into the next stitch, just 1 single crochet. Another single crochet 2 together, or decrease here. And then, let's see, and then we're going to repeat that. Single crochet 2 together. Oops, I think I got stuck on something there. I have a little fiber fill creeping out here, so I'm going to try and pull that out. Sometimes when you do that, though, it grabs onto more, and and then it's like bringing its friends outside too, and then all of a sudden you have a big fuzzy thing on the outside. So you might have to go in and restuff if that happens to you. All right, so here's another decrease. And if this part is just like way too fiddly, because this last round is kind of hard, you could also try just doing 1 more round of single crochet into each instead of decreasing, and then just closing up the hole at the bottom. You'd still get a point. It wouldn't be quite as, I wanted my point to be like, you know, really pointy at the very bottom. So that's why I did these decreases here. But if that's just, you know, causing you angst and you're starting to feel angry about crochet, don't do that. Just do 1 more round of single crochet, and then you can close them all up like how I'm going to show you how to do it right now. So the last thing you're going to do is you're just going to insert your hook, pull up your loop, and you're going to fasten that off. So give yourself a little bit of a tail so you can weave it in. And you can see there's still a little bitty hole in this, in the end of this heart here. So we're just going to close that up with our tapestry needle, or our darner's needle here. And we are going to just run that needle through the front loop of each of the last 6 stitches, or if you ended up not decreasing, you just run it through all those, you know, the last round, so that would be 10 stitches. So I'm just basically running it through the loop from the bottom to the top, all the way around, and when we get all the way around, I'm just going to pull it tight to close up that hole. All right, so we can close that up, make it nice and tight. I'm just kind of pulling on it. See, it's closed. Makes a very nice tip of the heart, and then you can weave that in. And you can look around before you get rid of this little strand here. If you have any holes that are showing like a little bit of the fiber fill through, you can use this. You can slide it underneath and just sort of fill in that space. I'm using my needle to tuck the fiber fill back in, and I'm just basically putting a thread behind that hole, that little tiny hole there, to fill it in with that red color, because the fiber fill that we're using is white, almost all fiberfill is white, so it does, you will see it just a tiny bit in some places if your stitches aren't very, very, very tight. So you can use, you know, this yarn tail to just, you know, look around, see if there's anything that needs to be filled in as you're weaving it in. And try to actually slide your yarn tail through the yarn, like splitting the yarns if you can, because that'll keep it in place a little better. But there shouldn't be a lot of, you know, nobody's actually going to be, I mean, you're wearing these as earrings, but it's not like you're wearing a mitten or something and it's rubbing against stuff. It's just, you just want your yarn ends to stay in. So see how this opened up just a little bit? That's why I'm glad I have my yarn tail on the outside. I can pull it in as tight as I can, make that hole as small as possible. And then I'm going to weave in my yarn tails here too. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying not to weave back and forth right where I'm going to be sending that chain through. I'm going to be sending my chain through right through here. So I don't really want my yarn to be going back and forth right along that path, because later my chain might get kind of tangled up in what I'm weaving in here. So I'm keeping it really pretty close to the tip of the heart when I'm weaving that in. Okay, you're gonna wanna weave it in a couple of directions like I did, and then you can cut that off. Okay.
Brenda, while you're doing the second side, I'm gonna jump in briefly. We have about 20 minutes left. Okay. So we don't have any questions that have popped in yet. Quite a few hellos from all over the world, really, and a lot of enthusiasm for this project. But I wanted to remind people, if you do have a question for Brenda and you want to get it in before we wrap up, you probably want to drop it in pretty quickly here. And if we have time, we will get to it at the end of the project. But we have about 20 minutes left with Brenda, a little bit shorter than that.
All right, so I have one more strand to weave in, and this one, when we weave this in, we are actually going to be sewing up that little tiny hole, that little gap between the lobes at the top of the heart. There we go. So you just can do like a little whip stitch, or you can do a mattress stitch, or you can really do any stitch here. This is going to get covered in paint, so it really doesn't matter. So I'm just sliding my needle underneath both sides, and I'm just going to do a little whip stitch. It's really only about 3 little stitches here to close that up, as we're sort of we're weaving in our end, but we're also just sort of sewing up this little tiny hole here. And then we can go ahead and weave that end in, and again, try to stay out of the path of the future path, I should say, of the chain that we're going to run through here. All right, so after you get your little hearts made, of course you're going to make 2 of these if you want 2 earrings after you get those made, we are going to paint them. So what I did, again, like I was saying before, I used 2 of these little quilter pins. Just going to move this because that one we don't need to worry about, and place them in the opposite sides, so that way, and you can just kind of check, you can let it just sort of dangle. See, it's close to the cup, but it's not actually touching it. That will just allow it to dry there, and it also can be a reminder, if you put your pins in about where you want to put that chain through your heart, it'll be a reminder not to put too much paint here and here where your pins are. If there's lots of paint through there, it might be a little bit harder to get your needle through later when you're going to be threading that chain through. Okay. So I just used about 2 coats on most of these. The pink ones, because these are a wool, the fabric was very fuzzy and it really soaked up the paint a lot. And it just did not want to get very bright and shiny, and I really wanted it to be bright and shiny, so I ended up doing 3 coats on that one. But you're just, you know, dabbing a little bit of paint. I started at the top of my heart like this and kind of paint in these streaks that it's a little bit more difficult to go sideways like this and then have it be shiny. So if you kind of go in the grain of where your threads are running up and down there, it makes it a little bit shinier. And you know, this is one of those things that's, it's really up to you how much of it you want to have gold. I mean, you could also certainly make these and not put any gold on. That's totally fine too. Actually, it would be really cute if you did like little rainbow of hearts or something for a bracelet or a necklace or something like that. But if you're doing the gold, you can decide how far down you want the gold to go. And for most of my hearts, I made it go, I thought about this as in thirds. So a third was pretty solidly gold, and then there was another third that was just like a little bit of gold, and then the bottom third that didn't have any gold on it. So when you do your first coat, I would say, you know, let it come down to about the halfway point of, or like a little further than what you want the very solid part to be, and you're gonna kind of blend the bottom just a little bit. Like see how, what I'm imagining is up here, it's going to be very solidly gold. On my next coat, that's gonna show up more. But it's just like little speckles of, oops, it's a little bit too much right there. I'm gonna blend that. And it's okay. It's okay for this to not be perfect. I really wanted these to look handmade, you know, that's why I really liked the combination of the shiny gold, but also with the warm feeling of the yarn feeling, you know, that crochet bumpiness, the texture, to have that kind of warmth to this project. Okay, so that's about where I would stop for the first coat. And you can see it is really not very shiny. It's kind of, I don't know, like it's a little bit bronzy looking almost, but it's not very metallic looking. And then you'll set it on your cup and let it dry. Once it dries, let's see, whoops, it's okay. Once it dries though, it'll look about like this. See, it's not very shiny, it's not very sparkly compared to this one. This one has 2 coats on it, and you can really see how the gold shows up a lot better. So you really need that first coat to kind of seal the fibers a little bit and keep the paint from just sinking into the crocheted fabric. And then you can go back in and then add that second coat, or in the case of the pink ones, I had to do it 3 times because it just kept soaking in to my project. So.
Brenda, while you're painting, we have a question here from Eliza, I believe. I'm sorry if I'm saying it wrong. Is there a way to dye fiber fill for a small project like this? So I'm guessing, so you wouldn't have that white showing through. What do you think about that?
Well, you could do it. I don't know if it's really worth it or not because it's such a small area. What I would recommend if you're really concerned about that showing through, I mean, first of all, if your stitches are tight enough, you shouldn't really see it very much. I mean, I don't really see it on these projects, especially once they're painted. But if you're really concerned about that, then I would just use, like, buy a red roving or a red wool yarn that you can kind of fuzz up and use that to stuff your heart instead of using the fiber fill because they're so tiny. You know, to dye it, I don't know. I mean, I actually was a dyer in a previous job and I think if you tried to dye the fiber fill, it would end up in kind of a clump, and I just, you know, you're gonna need, because that fiber fill is a synthetic, it's just, I don't know, you're gonna have to have a higher heat to your dye bath. I just feel like it's too complicated for what you would really need here. So yeah, if you're really concerned about it, just get some red roving or some red yarn, wool yarn that you can like untwist, or I mean, you could even use acrylic as long as you can untwist it and make it fluffy, and then use that to stuff the heart, and then that way you wouldn't see it through the holes at all. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do, so you know, I'm just gonna let that dry. Between coats, it really needs to dry at least a couple of hours, I think, or at least till it's, you know, I guess depending on the paint you're using and how thick you put it on, things might be different. But so I already painted this one, so we're just moving ahead like as though that one dried, and here it is. Look, you guys. But I want to show you how to thread the chain through. So, like I said before, you need to make sure that the links on your chain are big enough so that you can put this beading wire through. So I'm just threading the beading wire right through that bottom hole there. And then I'm going to match up the 2 ends of my wire like this. And then I'm going to thread both ends through the eye of my needle, like that. And then I'm going to bring this pretty close. And then this beading wire actually is coated in like a nylon coating, which is a little bit unhelpful because it doesn't want to crease very well. If you use other beading wires, it'll probably crease pretty well. But if you are able to make it, you know, kind of fold it there, then it's going to hold that in place pretty well. I'm just going to hang on to it with my fingers. And then we're going to slide it through the heart. So somewhere, basically what you're trying to do, if you can see with the needle, you want this to come out of the furthest point of the heart, but it has to be below where this is, right here. So you don't want it down here, because this heart is, after you paint it, it's a little top heavy. And when I say top heavy, don't get freaked out, because these are very, very light earrings. They're super light. Like everyone I show these to, they're like, oh, those are so cute. And they put them in their hand and they say, wow, these are really light. Because they don't really look like they'd be that light, but they are. But you just want to make sure it's going through in a straight line from side to side. And this may take a little bit of feeling around in there to come out at the right spot. There we go. I came out just a little bit over here, so I had to back it up. And you really want it to be as centered as you can on the side. All right, and so we're going to push that through, and you're probably going to need your jewelry pliers to get it to come out or something, because it's a little bit tricky to just do this with your fingers. Once you get it going though, once the needle pops through, then you should be fine. All right. There we go. So the chain has come out the other side. And you don't have to worry about it being like absolutely centered on there, because you can wait until you put the fish hook earring on to fully center the heart. All right. So then the next thing is to add your jump ring to connect these pieces together, and also to add your fish hook onto it. So all three of those ends are going to go together. And because this is so small, I just want to show you with my hands, when you have a jump ring, mine's kind of oval, and here's like the slit in my jump ring. When you have a jump ring and you're opening it up, you don't want to open it up like this, because then it's really hard to get those ends to go, you know, to meet flush. If you twist it, here, let me show you from a top view. If you twist it like this to open it, then you can twist it back and these two will meet up, and it won't be, you know, you're not going to be trying to push these towards each other and then it never quite meets. So that's what I'm going to be doing here. I'm going to just take my jewelry pliers, one on each side, and I'm going to twist it open. And then I'm going to slide the very last link through that jump ring. And then the same thing with this side. That very last link goes through the jump ring like that. And then we will put that. And then if you have a favorite side of your heart, I think both sides look pretty good. So it doesn't matter to me, but just pay attention at this point, because where you put your fish hook in, whether it goes this way or whether it goes this way, that's going to determine the front or the back of your earring. So we'll just slide that in there, and then slide these back together until they meet. So they should be touching. And then at this point, you can just kind of even out the two sides. Let's by pulling on it a little bit. Like that. And so, yeah, so you just want the two ends of the chain to be fairly even, so that way it hangs. Although the first time I made these, one of them was pretty crooked and it actually looked sort of cute being a little bit sideways. So maybe that's a personal preference thing. I don't know. But yeah, and that's all there is to it. You just put the chain through and then you're able to wear them. So cute.
Brenda, people are loving these in the comments. I think you got a lot of people excited. I've got one question in from Marilyn. This is about the paint that you're using. So if you could showcase that a little bit. I know you said it's specified in the plans, but what are you painting with?
Yep, so this is called Folk Art Treasured Gold. It's just, you can find this in big box stores, or you can order it, you know, Amazon has it, lots of different craft stores have it. But I think this is, let's see, is this a water-based paint? I'm not exactly sure. I think it is. But it is very, it's like the most metallic-y looking paint that I could find at the big box store. So I already had an acrylic paint, like Liquitex acrylic gold or something like that, and I tried that, and that looked pretty good. But this just had a little extra shininess to it, so that's why I bought this one. But really, it just needs to be any kind of metallic paint. Well, if you want it to be metallic, I mean, you could also make it not metallic. It would be kind of cool if it was like a different color too, you know? Like you could have a white heart with red on the top or something like that. I don't know. But it just needs to be a fabric that can, or a paint that can stick to fabric. But that's most acrylic paints will do that. Like even if it's not an actual fabric paint, it still will stick to, you know, it's not like somebody is going to be rubbing something against this earring all the time. You know, it should stay pretty well.
All right, I've got a comment that I want to slide in under the wire here. This is from Elaine. So Elaine currently knits hearts for gift tags and enclosures, but they take forever to knit in 2 pieces, sew them up and stuff them. So this pattern might be faster for Elaine, so she can't wait to try it. I wondered if you wanted to quickly speak on that for any knitters out there that might want to crochet a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I was saying before too, if you are comfortable holding the yarn, this has, you know, all the stitches are really basic and the heart comes together. You don't really have to do hardly any sewing. I mean, there's just that little speck when you're weaving in your ends at the top and then, you know, cinching in things at the very bottom, but you don't have to sew pieces together. So it's very, you know, once you get going on these, and it's actually, if you use a stitch marker, it's really easy to memorize. So you shouldn't be having, you know, because I know for me, little tiny projects like this, half the time you're spending like just trying to figure out what you're doing. But once you do it once and then it kind of makes sense to you, I mean, you're just basically making those 2 little bowls. And then as you crochet the bottom of it, you know where your decreases, they go on the front and the back of the heart, and you just keep going around until you're pretty much down at the point and then you're done. So yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea. It would be super cute. And then, you know, depending on what size you'd like them to be, it might be a little bit easier for you too if you use like a slightly larger yarn, you know, just so you can hang on to it a little bit easier, so it makes things go a little faster. But if you're used to knitting with a thin yarn, you shouldn't have any trouble with this little tiny one here, so.
All right, I'm going to give Brenda one more moment to show off today's project to the camera. And Brenda, any final thoughts you have before I send us off with a few reminders?
Well, I really hope that you guys make these and then you post some pictures of yourselves wearing them, because I love seeing pictures of your projects. Yeah, this is just a really fun one to make, and people will be so excited to have a handmade gift from you. So yeah, happy Valentine's Day to everybody out there.
Yes, happy Valentine's Day indeed. I know a lot of people are excited to try this project, so post those photos. We would love to see them. Now, remember, you want to join us again tomorrow. We've got another live tutorial coming your way. Tomorrow, we're streaming live with Maddie Gartman, and tomorrow's live stream starts at 2 p.m. Central Time. Maddie is going to be providing a live tutorial on how to make 3 interactive Valentine cookies. So you can download the materials list for yourself and the free directions right now using the link in the description, so you're ready before tomorrow's event. And of course, you can find the entire mini-series schedule in the video description. Quick reminder on that, you can always come back and view these in the future if there's something that you want to revisit. So keep an eye on that schedule. We hope to see you tomorrow. On behalf of Brenda and our entire team, we'll see you soon, and happy crafting.